Ahsoka episode 6 just introduced a mystery that has completely captivated me. I'm not thinking a lot about Thrawn, Ezra, Sabine, or even Ahsoka. I'm thinking about Baylan and what is calling to him. And man, this stuff is blowing my mind. I think Filoni's doing it. He's grabbing up some of the craziest stuff from Legends and putting it into the Ahsoka show, injecting new life into the Star Wars franchise. So what exactly is going on with Baylan? Well, we get a lot of reveals in episode 6, all the way back in episode 2, during a conversation with Shin. We have it revealed to us that Baylan does know of Peridea, and he has heard stories of the power that is there. When he first arrives on Seagal and finds the area to put the map into, he is shocked and amazed. And when Morgan arrives there, Baylan asks her about who created this area, this map. Morgan responds to Baylan, an ancient people from a distant galaxy. Then Baylan says, Peridea. He already knows about Peridea from old stories, from old Jedi fairy tales. Then after Morgan leaves to go back up to the Scion to prepare, Baylan and Shin have a conversation about this new galaxy. Shin is curious, what is out there in this new galaxy? What will happen if they actually get there? Baylan tells her that for some, this will mean war. For some, this will mean a new beginning. And then Shin asks him, well, what about for us? To which Baylan responds, power such that you've never dreamed of. So basically, even before episode 6, we knew that Baylan knew of Peridea from old Jedi fairy tales, and he also knew that there would be an incredible source of power there on this planet. And it's a really nice payoff in episode 6 when Baylan finally gets to Peridea and is just in shock. He is in awe almost the entire episode. And the conversations that he has with Shin while on this new planet are fascinating. They give us so many clues as to what is going on and what is motivating the character. He remarks that this place is one of stories, of myth, of legend, of fairy tale. He talks about the inevitability of the cycle of the Jedi and the Empire, the light and the dark. Baylan admits to Shin that what he seeks is the beginning, to be able to end the cycle. And the fact that all of this information comes from old stories that the Jedi told the Padawans, I think is really interesting, but perhaps also telling of what the lesson was and what Baylan is actually seeking. Because if he's seeking the beginning and he wants to end the cycle, that seems like the fight between the light and the dark. And so I went back and considered all the possibilities from legend of old things within the galaxy that might have wound up in a fairy tale told to Jedi Padawans in the temple. And I thought of the Gree and the Qua, who were ancient sentient beings that were warring with each other across the galaxy. There were also a lot of species or races that were either created by the Qua or the Gree or were made to serve them. Among them were the Rakatan, who overthrew the Qua and eventually conquered the entirety of the galaxy with their infinite empire. And then would also later be the very first Jedi, or the Jedi. And these crazy looking ships called the Tho-Yor actually took all of these Force sensitives to Tython and the original Jedi, just like the Qua were about Balin. There were beings known as the Celestials, who maybe were the same thing as the Ones, who were the Mortis gods, and they seem to be showing different species around the universe the power of the Force, starting with the Qua. And look, that's a lot, and it's super nerdy, but I'm just trying to tell you that there were a lot of different things in these old Republic, now legend stories. And even the stories back then alluded to things that came before them. So there's a lot of different stuff that could end up as Jedi fairy tales for the Padawans in the actual Star Wars canon, or at least that's the way I think Dave Filoni is thinking about this. So I considered all of these different things as the thing that was calling to Baylan. Well, this could be the Rakatan, this could be the Yuuzhan Vong, perhaps it's even one of the Ones or the Celestials, maybe it's the Qua, maybe it's the Gree, but really and truly, the more I thought about it and the more I looked into this, I think it's probably actually Abeloth. And this is mostly because I believe the Ones and Abeloth herself falling into the dark side and basically changing from the mother into Abeloth. I view that as one of the earliest things that happened in the entire canon of Star Wars, at least according to legends. And I also think it's maybe the thing that leads to this imbalance and this cycle that Baylan is talking about. Now, the TLDR on Abeloth is that she was once a female servant of the Ones being the Mortis gods that we meet in the Clone Wars. And on a very nerdy side note, the Ones or the Mortis gods are actually probably not the Celestials, but there's something similar to the Celestials that can exist in real space and in the cosmic force. And I mostly think that because they can actually die, right? Not only do they die seemingly in that episode of the Mortis arc in Clone Wars, but in Legends, Luke Skywalker went to Mortis to get the dagger of Mortis in order to be able to kill Abeloth, who kind of ascended to that level of power of the One. But I digress. And look, a lot of this stuff's super nerdy, and I totally get it. I'm trying to keep us on track here. I'm trying not to get too in the weeds. So Abeloth, she was originally a female servant to the Ones, to the Father, the Son, and the Daughter, except that she was kind of amazing and actually made their life together and their family dynamic much better. So she gets kind of adopted into the family and becomes known as the Mother. She's really good at keeping the balance and just keeping everything peaceful and holding this cosmic family together. But there was a problem. She was mortal and the Ones were not. So over time, she ages and begins to die. And the family of these entities, the Mortis gods, didn't want her to die. They wanted to keep her around. She wanted to be immortal and stay with them forever. Now, on the planet where the Ones were at, there were two pieces of like divine cosmic power. One was known as the Fountain of Power. Another one was known as the Pool of Knowledge. They both existed at the base of a volcano, which I almost think Baylan was looking at when he said he seeks the beginning in episode 6. So the son and the daughter want to give these cosmic gifts to their mother to make her into something like them to keep her around. But the father says, no, that can't happen. And basically, while they're arguing about this, the mother drinks from the Fountain of Power and dives into the Pool of Knowledge and becomes Abeloth. It didn't actually work in the way she thought. It actually corrupts her. It turns her into a dark side god. And it warps her into a horrifying monster that just seeks destruction. It's after this happens that the father takes his children and flees the planet that they were on, instead going to Mortis. And as the story goes, Abeloth is stranded on that planet and has a horrible time of it and actually warps the planet into this weird wasteland. And basically the lore when it comes to Abeloth is that she would be hidden on this world, but would actually be able to call out to different Sith or Jedi in order to lure them there, where she would possess them and then kind of leave and go cause more chaos. So let's go back to Baylan and kind of piece this together as to why this is likely Abeloth calling out to him. Number one, of course, he is seeking power, and he seems to be seeking the beginning, and he wants to stop the cycle of light fighting dark, fighting light, fighting dark. And as I said, a lot of people speculate that the mother's fall to chaos is the first thing that actually puts the Force completely out of balance, and it causes that cycle that Baylan's talking about. I also think it's really interesting that a lot of this seems to be formed from the fairy tales that Baylan was taught at the Jedi Temple. And part of the reason I'm so interested in this is that it's cool to think about what kind of stories would they be telling to the Padawans about the ancient like world or galaxy, right? And to me, the story of the mother and her fall and the idea of seeking unnatural power and knowledge that mortals are not supposed to have, that seems right on target for that kind of ancient myth and that fairy tale that would be taught to Padawans. And when you juxtapose that against Baylan's disillusionment of the Jedi itself, it's easy to see why he might be looking back to an old fairy tale from his youth and seeing that the Jedi themselves might have been wrong and arrogantly feeling like he actually should have that power and that knowledge, and that he could go back to the beginning and stop this inevitable cycle that the Jedi seemed powerless to stop. Baylan also has another conversation with Shin that illuminates the possibility of this being Abeloth. He talks about how the Night Sisters, who Shin points out seem to be very eager to leave this wasteland. Yeah, Baylan's pointing out that they might flee a power greater than their own. He says that something calls to me. Can't you hear it? Something stirs here. Can't you see it? And they even play this really creepy sound, which feels similar to either the Purgle or to the whispering of the Night Sisters. They play that sound underneath scenes with Baylan while he is being introspective about his plan and what he thinks is on Peridea. Baylan also talks about how this was once the great witch kingdom of the Dathomir, and that the existence of the Great Mothers proves this. And so to put this all together, I think it's likely that the story of Peridea, the Ones, and the Mother's fall were likely all fairy tales told to the Padawans of the Jedi to sort of warn them against seeking unnatural power and unnatural knowledge. It's even possible that Abeloth being imprisoned somewhere on that planet gave it a source of power which created the empire of the witches. Perhaps they even derive some of their power just from being in close proximity to a being like Abeloth. And it's possible that Abeloth becoming a little bit more free or less dormant led to this witch kingdom completely collapsing and the cause of this world becoming this wasteland. And interestingly, in the old legend stories, Abeloth was able to be a little bit more free after the death of the Ones on Mortis. This actually takes into account the Clone Wars episodes of Mortis, where the father and the daughter, and seemingly the son as well, are all killed. It was also the case that whenever time fluctuated or the Force was in chaos, Abeloth herself was able to basically be more present, to sort of escape her prison, and to be able to lure either Jedi or Sith to her. So Baylan being called to Peridea, seeking this power, could absolutely be Abeloth reaching out to him, and perhaps the death of the Mortis gods, or even the end of the Empire via Luke Skywalker, was a fluctuation in the Force or something crazy enough to allow Abeloth to just have a little bit more freedom to be able to try to lure someone like Baylan to her. This would be absolutely incredible and a really cool way to tie in the events of all of the other Star Wars movies and maybe even some of the shows to the greater cosmic force and to what's happening with the Ones and Abeloth becoming free. It could also really make the scenes with Anakin in episode 5 more meaningful, because a lot of people think he has finally ascended to being one of the Ones, a true Mortis god, and perhaps that's why he is guiding Ahsoka to Peridea. Perhaps, just like in ancient times, the Mortis gods are going to have to make sure that Abeloth remains on this planet, remains captured and imprisoned. And this would really be wild for Star Wars, like having a Sith god or goddess and something as horrifying as Abeloth coming into canon would really shake things up. And it's interesting to see how a company like Disney would handle something as evil and dark as that coming into live action canon. But I do remember back to some images in one of the very first trailers that was discussing the High Republic, where it seemed like some of the Jedi of the High Republic era actually did get corrupted and end up having those really weird wide smiles with a bunch of sharp fanged teeth that resemble Abeloth. Like some of the Jedi would just kind of become that and like be corrupted and be demonic in Legends, but there were specific Jedi, like there was one that lost her way in the Force. She was one of Luke's students. She ends up finding where Abeloth is at, and Abeloth basically like absorbs her entire being, and then Abeloth ends up becoming an actual living being that could shapeshift into the look of this old Jedi or into a different version of her with that weird hook smile. And weirdly, I think that could be what's going on with Shin. It might be the case that Baylan's actually leading Shin to Abeloth to offer her up as a sacrifice so that then Abeloth would be able to walk among mortals once again. That would be crazy. Or maybe Baylan gets absorbed as well. Maybe they both don't end up finding Abeloth, and that's left as like a hanging thread where they want to go back to Peridia. Maybe the two of them actually drink from the fountain of power or swim in the pool of knowledge and end up becoming crazy powerful themselves. There's just so many different ways they could take this, but the more I thought about what could be calling to Baylan, the more I thought about what his actual motivations were, and the more research I did, I just kept coming back to Abeloth. It just makes the most sense to me that Abeloth is the thing that's calling to Baylan, that she exists at that beginning that he is referencing. Her fall may well be the beginning of this cycle that he wants to end. And holy crap, would it be amazing if they brought Abeloth into Star Wars canon and set her up to be a massive threat to the known galaxy in future content. Let me know what you think about the theory in the comment section below. You can also just come by one of the live streams that we do Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays and just ask me your questions about this then and there. This would absolutely be bananas. I've got a feeling it might actually be what Dave Filoni is doing with this show, and it will cause a lot of people to lose their freaking minds if he does. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.